Good afternoon and welcome to the More Knits podcast. This is a bi-weekly video podcast about knitting, sometimes crochet, and today some yarn dyeing. My name is Abby. I'm a college student living and working and knitting in the northwestern United States. Welcome to episode 8. You can find me on Instagram as more.knits. You can find me on Ravelry as just my name, Abby Moreland, and you can also join the podcast Ravelry group called More Knits Podcast. All of those things will be linked in the description box down below, and you can also find show notes and notes on everything that I talk about in this episode in the description box as well, and you can find those notes in the Ravelry group also. And speaking of the Ravelry group, before we begin getting into the knitting, I wanted to give a shout out to everyone who has joined the Ravelry group. I really appreciate everyone who has become a member and shown their support that way. It means a lot and it really helps this podcast. So if you would like to join, feel free to do so. You won't get any sort of notifications or anything unless you sign up for specific threads. So don't feel like there's any pressure or anything when you do that, but I do want to list out everyone who has, sorry, I just got a text. So it happens when you film on your phone. I want to list out all of the usernames of everyone who has joined the Ravelry group right here and just give a shout out to all of these wonderful people. Some of these people have also test knit for me, which I so very much appreciate. So yeah, just thank you so much for supporting the podcast. And I also wanted to mention everyone who messaged me on Instagram about me not filming last week. It has been 3 weeks since we last talked, and I appreciate your messages on Instagram about just me not filming and just your encouragement and saying how much you missed the podcast that week. It really meant a lot, and I am totally fine. Just got carried away in other things, and I'm not going to go completely into it or anything just because it's not something that I want to discuss publicly at the moment, but it is very important to prioritize your mental health over things like knitting. And even though it's not necessarily something that I want to do always, it's something that we should all be doing. So I just needed some time. I wasn't really in a headspace to film. And also last weekend, which would normally be my podcasting weekend, I actually ended up dyeing yarn all weekend long, which I will talk about. And it was very fun and exciting. And I tried to make up for it last weekend film, and it just... I just wasn't in the right place to do that. So, skipped a week, coming back at ya. That will, it's going to happen sometimes. And I love filming this podcast, but sometimes other things in my life are more important. So, let's get into the knitting. I am drinking coffee, black coffee as usual. And I also have some water. Every time I don't have water when I'm podcasting, I get really sad because my voice just gets very crackly and dry. By the end of it, I'm already clearing my throat. So hopefully that doesn't happen. And I've written out show notes for today, so I feel very prepared and ready to show you what I'm working on. Let's get into the knitting. So no finished objects today. It has been a while since we last talked. Last weekend I did not knit at all. And really last week I didn't knit much at all. There's been a couple weeks since we last talked where I wanted to knit, but there was a lot going on. I was very busy. I was doing a lot. I was really tired, and I was dealing with a lot mentally. And so I really... Even though it's been a while since we last talked, I really haven't knit a ton, but I definitely do have things to show, and they're definitely exciting, at least to me. So, I don't think this podcast episode will be lacking, but I don't have any finished objects, which I am okay with. It happens. So let's instead get straight into whips. So the first whip I have is one that you have seen before. This is my latest sock design, and I'm really excited because I got to the heels on not one sock, but 2 socks. So I think last time I mentioned that I really wasn't knitting on these, and I wasn't sure why, because I love the design and I love writing patterns, and I just like, I don't know, lost my mojo with this for some reason. And I realized it was because I was knitting them on double pointed needles, and I just kind of lost that flow. And I also wanted to try knitting them 2 at a time, which I did. I knit the entire rest of the sock legs, which is about 7 inches, my preferred length for a sock leg, magic loop 2 at a time, and I have now split off for the heels, which I'm doing separately because it's a lot easier. I actually did do the heel flaps magic loop 2 at a time, but the heel turns it's just way easier to do it when to do it separately. So that's what's going on here. And also, I think I've mentioned before, I'm writing this pattern to include instructions for both double points and magic loop, and not 2 at a time. It's very easy to convert a magic loop pattern into 2 at a time if you want to. That's not how I'm writing the pattern though, but that is why you see this sock is ready to knit the gusset on double points, and this sock is ready to knit the gusset on magic loop. And I don't know, I think a lot of people, if they're knitting their socks magic loop, they change to double points when they're knitting the heel. At least I do that because it's a lot simpler. But this is what magic loop looks like if you decide to stick with magic loop throughout the whole sock. It's a little bit more difficult in my opinion. I prefer to split for double points or change to double points, but I still wanted to include this in the pattern, so that is why this looks the way it does. It looks very silly, but it's totally doable, and it's also not that difficult. So the yarn I'm using for these is the Value Yarns Huntington, which is a pretty affordable yarn from Webs. And it's a very soft yarn. I really like it, actually, and I love this colorway. Such a gorgeous color. Really, really into neutrals like this. And yeah, knitting these on US 1 2.25, which is my use for sock knitting. And I wanted to just show you the texture. The texture is on the front, and let me actually show you these. So texture is on the front. It's sort of like a ribbed, like a broken rib texture, and then on the back it is just stockinette. And I'm writing this pattern for a dropped heel and gusset. So I'm really liking this. I was pleasantly surprised or happy that I was correct about just needing to switch to magic loop. I really kind of found my stride with these and knit a lot on these since we last talked. And my plan is, since I live in the US, since we have 4th of July off next week for our Independence Day, my plan is to really kind of focus on these socks, focus on writing the pattern. It's very close to being done. I just have a couple more things to write, and really finish writing this by next weekend. And then the weekend after that, I want to work on photographing or the pattern layout. I haven't decided which one yet. So anyway, slowly working on these, really enjoying it. Hopefully soon. I have a couple patterns that I'm working on, and my goal is to get them released by the fall. So you might not see those for a while, depending on when I finish them, but hopefully the pattern will be out soon. Okay, moving on to other works in progress. Almost all of the whips I'm going to show you in this episode you have not seen before, so that's kind of exciting. So this next project is more socks, and these are some giant socks. So I am knitting these socks 2 at a time. And this was actually the first time that I tried 2 at a time, and once I got the hang of it on these, I transferred my sock design sample over to 2 at a time. These are just plain vanilla socks, and these are actually socks for my father for Father's Day. I cast them on Father's Day weekend, however, so I was definitely not going to get them done in time for Father's Day, but he can't really wear them anyway, so I figured he would be fine with getting them a little bit later. But I've made really good progress on these. I'm past the heels. I'm working on the foot. I'm probably about an inch into the foot. And yeah, I have been working so much on these. And I've really been enjoying 2 at a time. As I mentioned, it's my first time trying it. It's always been something that I wanted to try. I really like Magic Loop, and yeah, I just had never tried it before, and I feel like with these socks, which are 72 stitch plain vanilla socks, 7-inch leg, and they are made for, or they're going to be made to fit a size US 12 men's shoe. Big socks. I figured I would try 2 at a time just so that when I finish them, they will be finished. And I'm really happy I did that. It kind of doesn't feel like combined, I've basically knit a full sock, and it really doesn't feel that way. It still feels like I'm on the foot, so, which is good because I am. But I'm really happy with these, and I'm excited to be finished with them when I'm finished with them and not have to knit another one. I was really loving these for a while just because it was the perfect vanilla project for me when I was really tired and I didn't really want to be working on anything too involved, and yeah, these were really nice to work on. I'm kind of getting done with them now. I kind of don't want to work on them anymore, but I will definitely finish them, and my goal is to finish them by August. I will probably finish them before that, but I'm just putting a goal in my on myself so that they will get done because they are a gift, and I'm actually enjoying gift knitting. I'm knitting quite a few things as a gift. I'm knitting my boyfriend's sweater, knitting these socks for my dad, and I don't know, I'm realizing I actually enjoy gift knitting quite a bit, and I don't usually do a lot of gift knitting. Most of the things I knit are for myself, but I've really been kind of getting into that spirit and enjoying knitting for other people. So let's talk about some details with these massive socks. So the yarn I'm using is Lion Brand Sock Ease in the colorway Rock Candy. I just picked this up at Michael's. They were about $10 per skein, per 100 gram skein. And as soon as I cast on both socks, I was just like, why did I buy 2 skeins? Because I'm pretty sure I could have gotten away with just 1 skein. I think I'm gonna have so much of this yarn left over because I'm already through the heel, and I've already started on the feet, and I have this much yarn left. So anyway, I don't know. I guess I was worried about yarn and just wanted to make sure that I really had enough. But anyway, I might make like a pair of socks for myself, or I'm not sure. It's a very neutral looking colorway. I really like the pop of green throughout. It's kind of these like micro stripes. It's not really striping. I don't know. I guess you would consider that self-striping. I'm not sure if you would. But it's fun to knit with regardless. And I'm not sure if it's like my dad's colors necessarily, but I thought I would do something a little bit different. The last socks I knit him were blue, and I almost picked up another colorway that was blue for him, and I was like, no, I don't want to knit him another pair of blue socks. So I decided to go a little bit outside of my comfort zone and maybe his comfort zone, but I showed him on Father's Day. I had a pretty significant amount done, and I showed him, and he was really excited. And I think he's excited for the thinner gauge. The last socks I knit him were a drops, no, not drops, Patton's Croy, which is a little bit thicker sock yarn, and he likes them, but I think these are going to be a little bit more comfortable in his shoes. I know for me, a smaller gauge is more comfortable for me to wear. So anyway, I'm going to stop talking about these, but hopefully by the next podcast they will be done, just so that I can finish them, have them done. But I am enjoying knitting on them, and they really have helped me get my sock mojo back. For a while there, I just was not enjoying knitting socks, and now I am loving socks. So speaking of socks, I have another sock whip that I actually just cast on this morning, and I am loving this. So this is my first pair of self-striping socks. Knit Picks recently released their Felici yarn again, and I've never knit with their Felici yarn, but I've heard, lots of different people talk about it. It's a pretty, it's a Knit Picks yarn. It's not like extremely luxurious or anything, but they have a lot of fun colors. They're affordable for a self-striping yarn, and since I had never knit with self-striping before, I thought, I've always wanted to try, and so I thought I would pick some up. So I picked up quite a few different colors. You can see behind me here. That's those are the other Felici skeins that I bought, and I love all of the colors. They all look beautiful in person, and I am really liking this. It's very bright and kind of neon, which is not my go-to at all. But I love this so much. I was looking at all of my yarn the other night, and I was trying to figure out which colors I wanted to cake up, and this one just kept popping out at me. And I cast this on today. Like, this is how much I've knit. And of course, going from 72 stitch socks 2 at a time, these massive, slightly boring socks to knit on, to a small 60 stitch self-striping sock. Of course this is going to fly off the needles, and I have just been enjoying this so much, and as everyone says, you really just want to keep knitting until you get to the next colorway. It's totally true. You just want to knit stripe after stripe after stripe. You don't want to put it down, and so I'm really, really enjoying this. This has been a really nice, not necessarily palette cleanser, but kind of, it is, as much as I'm enjoying gift knitting, it is nice to knit for myself again, just because I know I'm going to be able to enjoy this project until, long after it's done. So I am knitting these on my Hiya Sharps US 1 2.25, which I have never used before. I recently bought them. I bought a 40-inch cable for 2 at a time socks, and I also bought a 40-inch Chowgu needle for the other 2 at a time that I'm knitting. And this is too long of a cable to knit one sock on, but these needles are really, they're very affordable. And so I didn't mind buying a long cable, knowing that I'd probably mostly just want to knit 2 at a time socks on them. I think I am going to buy another pair of the Hiya Sharps with a smaller cable, just so that it's a little bit more comfortable to knit single socks on, because I am enjoying knitting 2 at a time socks, but I'm not sure if it's going to be my go-to. I think I really enjoy the process of just knitting a single sock. They seem to knit up a little bit faster, even though that's not really true, but you just see so much more progress made in each knitting session. And I also really like the just how easy they are to throw in your bag and to carry around. And it is, you know, 2 at a time socks are, they are a little bit cumbersome, and I did have ladders in the beginning for quite a while. It took me a while to get my tension right with the joins, and now I don't have ladders, so that's exciting. But you know, and you have a lot of yarn management, and your yarn's kind of getting tangled a little bit, and you really just have to be conscious of what you're doing. At least I do, because I'm kind of new to 2 at a time, very new to 2 at a time. So until I get a lot more comfortable with that, I definitely, you know, I'll probably still prefer just knitting one sock at a time. But anyway, I wanted to talk about the needles. I love these needles. ChiaoGoo's are still my favorites, and it's mostly because of the cord. The High Sharps are sharp, and they are beautiful. I really like sharp needles, which is funny because the way that I knit, I use my pointer finger to push the needle down. So these aren't too sharp for me. I really like them. In the very beginning, when I discovered ChiaoGoo's, those were a little bit sharp, and I thought I was going to have a problem. Ended up loving them. I always thought the High Sharps would be too sharp for me to knit with comfortably, and they're totally not. They're lovely, wonderful needles, and very affordable as well. They're about the price range I found as ChiaoGoo's, and yeah, they're great needles. The cord is pretty stiff. It's very flexible, as you can see. I can just kind of move this all around, but it's not flexible in the way that the ChiaoGoo's are. Let me grab. So here is the ChiaoGoo cord, and you can see it moves around really a very similar way that the High Sharps do. These are the ChiaoGoo red lace fixed circulars, and these are the High Sharp fixed circulars. But the difference is that the ChiaoGoo needles are some sort of metal wire with like a plastic coating, and so they almost feel like they're never going to kink up. I actually have had a pair kink up on me before, really because of my own fault. I was doing stupid things with the needle I shouldn't have been doing when I was knitting Magic Loop, but yeah, they're very flexible. They kind of have no memory. I love ChiaoGoo's for the cable. And High Sharps are a little bit stiffer for me. They're more akin to the Addy Turbo needles, which I'm actually not a huge fan of. These are better than the Addy cables, in my opinion. They are more flexible and softer than the Addies. But I actually really like the stiffness of this cable for Magic Loop, especially knitting 2 at a time, because when you're knitting 2 at a time, you know, obviously you have to pull the needle out, knit across, and then you have to push the needle back in like this. And when you have 2 socks on the needles, the middle section where like in between the 2 socks can be a little bit difficult to slide the needle very like efficiently through both of the socks. ChiaoGoo's, I find I have to pull on the cord in order to get the needle back in. So rather than pushing the needle like this back through, I actually have to take this side and pull it back through. But with these High Sharps, I can just push it back through pretty comfortably and easily because the cable is a little bit stiffer. So that's my opinion on the High Sharps versus the ChiaoGoo's. High are definitely sharper, so if you're not into sharper needles, probably don't give these a try. If ChiaoGoo's ever bothered you with the cable being too flexible, or you just don't like it, whatever, but you like the needles, definitely try the High Sharps. They're great needles. I really like them. But I just realized I have not talked about the yarn very much, so I'm going to get back to that discussion. As I mentioned in the very beginning, this is the Knit Picks Felici. They released this in the early June, so kind of in the very beginning of summer. I guess that's still spring, but early June, I think, is when they released their new line of Felici, and I think that they had quite a few new colorways. I know that they didn't, I shouldn't say I know, I think that they didn't have as many colorways as they did in the past. I could be wrong about that, and I'm not sure if they actually had new colorways. I feel like some of them I had seen before and some of them looked new to me. But this colorway is called Dance Party, and these are all of the colors in the repeat. So it's going to start over with green right after the dark gray stripe. And you can see that it's not perfect. Some of the stripes are ever so slightly bigger. Yeah, it's not, it's not absolutely perfect. There is some, you can see here, I know my camera doesn't focus on this very well, but you can see there's some lighter blue and there's some kind of bleeding into the darker gray in the transitions between the different colors. That doesn't really bother me. I think that this looks really fun and no one's going to be inspecting my socks like that. So it doesn't really bother me. I knit a pretty long cuff, just a 2x2 ribbing, and these are just going to be vanilla socks, cuff down, with probably a, actually I haven't decided on the heel. I might try a Fish Lips Kiss heel because I've never done that before. I own the pattern, but I've never tried it out before. If you knit self-striping socks, let me know your preferred method for heels. And I also might change the toe, so I might knit contrasting heels and toes. Haven't decided yet. Second to last width is another one that you have not seen yet, and this is a new design that I'm really excited about, and this is a new beanie design. So here it is so far. I posted a photo of this on my Instagram. I actually posted it when it was a different version than this. It was a previous version that I decided to change, and I've since started to make that change. I haven't knit very much on it since that, but I will give you a little bit of a close-up on this. Simple 1x1 rib and just a very pretty simple seed or moss stitch rather, stitch for the body, and yeah, it's really pretty. I think I love this yarn so much, and here's a side of the back, or a view of the back. I don't know what I'm saying. This is Malabrigo worsted yarn in the colorway, I don't know how to say it, so I'm just going to put it up on the screen because I don't want to embarrass myself. But it is a lovely colorway, probably like, I think these colors, I was telling my friend the other day, who I recently taught how to knit, or kind of refreshed her on how to knit, and I was like, I think this is my favorite colorway, like this is what I would consider my favorite colorway, or my favorite color. And she was like, there's like 3 different colors in this. It's like, yeah, all of these colors, I would say. But yeah, I just think it's gorgeous. Probably won't talk too much more about this because it is a design that is not released yet. The only thing I will say, knitting on 16-inch circulars kills my hands, which is so strange. I haven't knit on 16-inch circulars in such a long time, which is funny because I learned to knit by knitting hats. I knit a lot of hats in the very beginning on 16-inch circulars, but just like this part of my hand, on both hands, but especially on my right hand, it was aching for a day or two after I had like made this much progress on this hat. I think it's just the way that like grip onto the needles, but also the fact that these are just some Knit Picks needles, and the actual needle is pretty short. So really what I'm gripping onto is the cable, and I think that's really hurting my hand. So I haven't picked this up in a while just because I haven't like wanted to experience that pain in my hand. I think what I'll probably do is switch this to Magic Loop instead. I just have to wait to have some needles free to be able to do that. But anyway, other than the weird 16-inch cable problem, I'm loving this hat, and I'm really excited for this design as well. My mind has just kind of been overflowing with ideas for new designs, and I'm just really enjoying it. Okay, last whip that I want to share today is some squares on my Cozy Memories blanket. I think I shared this last episode, and I had just started it, so I had a few of these squares. I think I had all of these squares so far. But since then, I've added this many squares, which is really exciting. Although I think I have used up all of my scraps this far. So I'm going to need to finish some of these socks so that I can have some more scraps to work into this blanket. But yeah, I'll go through them really quickly. So these first two, the orange and the purple, are really exciting because I actually dyed those myself, which I will talk about in just a moment. I'm going to talk about the yarn dyeing experience at the very end of this podcast. And then I think I'm going to call it a day. But yeah, I really, really love how the colors turned out. I think they are gorgeous. And they just make me really happy to look at. And okay, then I also knit this one, which this is a drops yarn that I knit some socks out of. This colorway is my Tanya, or what I knit my Tanya out of, with a little bit of leftover yarn because I didn't have enough of this for a square. This I knit some socks out of, just some random sock yarn that I had. This is Knit Picks Stroll yarn that I knit my first sample of the sock design that I'm working on out of, which I shared last week. And then these two colorways, or these two yarns, are some Malabrigo that I had, which I knit out. I knit my Ode to Spring shawl out of. So if you remember the gorgeous purple green colorway paired with the cream color. So I do have a couple ends, a few ends to weave in, but otherwise I've been staying on top of my ends. Like, until I hit that point, there are no ends. So I'm really happy about that. And I don't know, I'm not sure how long I'll make it or how big the blanket will end up being. I mean, it's going to be a work in progress for a very long time, and I'm just going to include every scraps that I have, and yeah, we'll see what happens with it. But it's making me so happy right now, and I love knitting on it, and the squares are just kind of the perfect mindless, gratifying project. And the one thing I need to do is order some better needles, because the needles I'm working on, the needles I'm using are not very good. So I need to order some better needles so that I have kind of a nicer experience working on that. But really, really enjoying that project. I'm so happy that I started it. Okay, so we are done talking about knitting. So if that is what you were here for, thank you for watching, and I will see you again in 2 weeks. But if you want to stick around to hear about my first yarn dyeing experience, that is what I'm going to talk about now. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about it because I don't want this to be a forever long podcast episode, but I had so much fun yarn dyeing, and actually, so my boyfriend and I dyed yarn together last weekend. We spent the entire weekend dyeing yarn. And we just had a blast with it. I probably spent about 3 weeks before that researching and buying everything, and a lot of what I got was from thrift stores. I bought pots from thrift stores and like measuring cups and stuff like that, and I got some spoons and other things at like Walmart, and I didn't spend a lot of money. I also picked up some bear yarn at, or ordered some bear yarn from Knit Picks. I brought over a skein, a hank, sorry, of what we were working with. This is the palette Knit Picks yarn. It's a really affordable bear yarn. It's not like my favorite wool ever. It is 100% Peruvian Highland wool, but it was really inexpensive, and that's really what I wanted this to be, because I wasn't sure. I mean, with yarn dyeing, you have to buy everything new. You can't use what's in your kitchen and then put it back in your kitchen. Everything that you use for yarn dyeing, if you're using acid dyes, I mean, and citric acid, if anything, if the citric acid touches any of those things, or if the dyes touch them, you don't want to use those tools for anything that you're going to be eating on. So really, it's best practice is to just, everything that you use for yarn dyeing, keep that for yarn dyeing, keep it separate from the rest of your kitchen. So it can get pretty costly, just because because you're having to buy everything new. You're having to buy stainless steel pots, and there's a lot that goes into it, not to mention the yarn and the dye, which is pretty pricey. The dye that I got was from Dharma Trading Company, and I bought a starter kit that came with 5 different primary color dyes, and it also came with citric acid, which was nice. Just made it very easy. I think I got the dyes within like a week or so, and that was also very affordable and great customer service. My experience buying from them was amazing. Totally recommend them. I will definitely be buying more dyes soon, because as I mentioned, we only had 5 different colors to work with. So any color that we made, we really had to create. And I tried to do some speckling as well, which I was doing it completely wrong. So it didn't really turn out anyway, but I couldn't really do speckling with that many colors, because I couldn't really create my own colorways to speckle with. Anyway, I'm gonna try not to go super in-depth into it. I did film a little bit of just kind of the process, not as like any sort of tutorial, because we're completely brand new to yarn dyeing. There's a spider on the wall that I'm looking at right now. It was a lot of fun, even though we didn't really know what we were doing, and we actually have plans to dye again tonight. So I'm super excited. I did look up some more tutorials and looked up a few more different techniques and stuff and how other people do it. So I'm excited to try that out and try to do a little bit better this time. But I wanted to go through all of the different yarns that we dyed, just because I was really excited about it. So what I ended up doing is I ended up buying 11 of those hanks from Knit Picks. I split them into 5 20-gram mini skeins. And so the majority of what we dyed were mini skeins, which are a little bit more difficult to dye, I think, than full-sized hanks. But the reason I did that was because I really wanted to allow us some freedom to just be able to dye whatever we wanted to dye, even if it didn't turn out right, and we wouldn't have guilt over like wasting 100 grams of yarn. So that's why I did that. We did dye 1 full-sized hank and 2 50-gram hanks, just for fun. But anyway, without further ado, I'm going to show you the first colorway that we dyed. So this is the first one that we did, and I think every time I look at it, I go back and forth between thinking that it is horrendous and thinking like, well, that's actually kind of cool. So I'm not sure what I think about it, but the way that we did this was we had this idea So this is my boyfriend and I, Matt. The inspiration for this colorway is he took his favorite color, which is green, and I took my favorite color, which is purple, and we each mixed our own versions. He did green, I did purple, and we put 2 mini skeins in the pot, and we tried to do kind of like a variegation with the green and the purple, but we didn't know what we were doing. I didn't know how to dye variegated yarn. We put too much water in the pot. Like, there was just a lot of things going on. This was the very first time we had ever dyed yarn before, so we did not know what we were doing. And ended up turning into this. I don't know. It's not bad. I think it's a little bit prettier on camera than it is in person. And you can definitely, you know, there's like some oranges, there's some blues, there's some green in there. Really what happened is the dye just completely, it almost immediately combined into each other, and so the variegation didn't really happen. Anyway, yeah, that was an interesting colorway. We actually named all of our colorways just for fun. So instead of talking about the inspiration and talking about the technique and how all of these different colors came about, I'm just gonna go through them really quickly and tell you what we named them. We were just having fun. We're not going to sell any of these or anything like that. But I do want to go through really quickly and tell you what we named them for fun. So that one we named, this colorway we named Frankenskein. Then we have Basic, which is one that I dyed. Alkaline, which is one that Matt dyed. Rose Part 1, which is one that I dyed. And we have a plan for this yarn because this is a skein that Matt dyed. This is a full-size skein, and this is called Rose Part 2. So these will end up going together in a project that we have planned out. That's the only thing that we have planned for any of these mini skeins, or any of the yarn that we dyed. I've wound some of these up by hand because I put these in my blanket, but this one is called Sunset Highway, named after the Caitlin Hunter design. I really like the way that one turned out. And this one, that's one I dyed. This is one that Matt dyed, and this one is gorgeous. This is one of my favorites. This was actually an accident, kind of. This one's called Komodo, and then this purple one is one that I dyed, and this one's called Dragon. And I love the pink, the like magenta speckles in there. I actually ended up really liking this colorway, even though this was also an accident. A lot of these are accidents. A lot of these were like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm just doing things. This one is called Smolder. This is a tiny skein. This is one that Matt dyed. It's kind of a deep red. This one is called I Want to Die, and I did that one. Matt did this one. This one's called The Best. This is another one that I did called Speckling is Hard. I'll let you figure out what happened there. This one is called Jungle, and this is one that Matt did. And this was another kind of mistake, but it actually ended up being really cool, and we both really like this one. And this one is one that I did. This is called Oops, I Made a Unicorn. And then 2 super ugly ones that I did. I was trying to variegate and I just couldn't do it, and I really tried. But yeah, they're pretty ugly. I'm not sure what's gonna happen with these. This one's called Crustacean, and the colors just really bled together in a way that I didn't really like. That's not really what I was going for. And then this one is called Sad Carnival. This one is very ugly. Every time I look at it, it makes me unhappy. And then the last 2 that we did, these were the last 2 skeins that we dyed, so we had definitely gained some experience by this point. This one is called Raspberry, and this is one that Matt dyed. And because it's so bright on camera, you're not really getting the full like tonality of the yarn, but it's really pretty. It's also not quite as bright in person as it's showing up on camera. So this one's called Raspberry. And this one is one that I did, and this is called Fake Raspberry because I was trying to dye inspired by the raspberry bushes that we have out in our yard, and it did not turn out looking like a raspberry, and Matt was trying to dye like a true red, but his turned out to be raspberry color. So anyway, we had a lot of fun dyeing, and hopefully we will get better at it. It is very hard. There's a lot involved, but we really took a kind of technical, scientific approach and took notes on everything, and I feel like we are really getting the hang of it and have figured some things out, and I'm really excited to dye again. So that is all I'm going to talk about in this episode. Thank you for watching as always, and thank you for your comments and your messages. Sometimes I feel like I'm kind of talking to myself, so I really appreciate hearing from you guys. And if you would like to follow me on Instagram or friend me on Ravelry or join our Ravelry group, all of those things will be in the description box and linked, so you will have no problem. And all of the information on the projects I talked about will also be in the description box below. So, but if you do have any questions, please let me know. I'm happy to answer any question you might have. So thank you again for watching, and I will see you in 2 weeks.